The candles on Dad's birthday cake were still flickering when my brother's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Pack your bags," he said. I swear the whole dining room went silent. Even the faint hum of the fridge seemed to stop. I kept my face perfectly still, my hand resting lightly on the edge of the mahogany table. My silk blouse clung to my skin. I'd been warm all evening, though not because of the candles. I glanced at my father, sitting at the head of the table, the man who used to make the whole world feel safe, but tonight, he just looked tired. My phone buzzed in my lap. For a moment, I let my thumb hover over the screen, watching my reflection in the polished wood. I could hear my own heartbeat over the clinking of someone's fork being set down. They still thought of me as the girl who left, the disappointment, the failure, the one who refused to play by their rules. I exhaled slowly, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and pressed call. Just one quick call. "Hi," I said when the line picked up. My voice was calm, even soft, but inside, something electric was crackling. "Bring the car around," I whispered. If my brother wanted me gone, I was going to make sure he saw exactly who he was asking to leave. I can still remember the last time I stood in this house as a daughter, not a guest. It was 3 years ago, in this very dining room, when the fight happened. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, with a job offer that wasn't exactly what my parents wanted for me. "You're turning down a perfectly good corporate position to go chase what? Some startup dream?" My brother Nathan had said, his voice dripping with disbelief. Dad's silence was worse than Nathan's words. He just stared at me, his jaw set, like he couldn't decide if I was brave or insane. "I'm not asking for permission," I'd said, my voice shaking even though I wanted it to sound steady. "This is what I want. It's my life." Mom had tried to smooth things over, but Nathan wouldn't let it go. "You're throwing away security. Don't come crying back when it blows up in your face." I remember gripping the edge of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. My throat burned as I swallowed back the tears threatening to fall. That night, I packed a single suitcase, just clothes, my laptop, and one thing that truly mattered, my grandmother's silver bracelet. She'd pressed it into my hand the night before she passed away and said, "Never let anyone else decide your worth, sweetheart. The world will try, but you don't have to listen." I slipped it on my wrist, zipped the bag, and walked out before sunrise. No one followed me. I moved into a cramped studio apartment in Chicago that smelled faintly of paint and possibility. I slept on an air mattress, lived off instant noodles, and woke up every morning with the weight of their words in my chest. But I also woke up with something else, a quiet, stubborn fire that said, "I'll show them." That first year was brutal. I took a marketing job at a small startup no one had heard of, working for a CEO who thought 20-hour days were a badge of honor. My studio apartment was so small I could touch my kitchen sink from my bed, and my rent left me with barely enough for groceries. But every night, I would slip off my shoes, feel the cool metal of Grandma's bracelet against my wrist, and remind myself why I was doing this. When my boss told me I had potential but needed to be tougher, I didn't break. I started staying later, learning everything I could, how to pitch, how to read a room, how to negotiate like I belonged at the table. By the second year, I'd moved up to marketing director. I hired my own team, and for the first time, I started to see real money in my bank account. The first time I hit 6 figures, I didn't call home. I bought myself a bottle of champagne, sat cross-legged on my cheap apartment floor, and toasted to the girl who walked away. My mentor, a brilliant woman named Alicia, who ran her own PR firm, noticed me at a networking event. She was the kind of woman who commanded a room without ever raising her voice. She took me under her wing, taught me the power of branding, not just for companies, but for myself. "You're not just selling a product," she told me one night over late coffee. "You're selling belief. Start with believing in yourself." I built my side hustle quietly, helping small businesses grow online. Within a year, my side hustle was making more than my full-time salary. By year 3, I quit the startup and ran my own agency full-time. I was careful, though. I kept my success quiet on social media, a vague post about work milestones here, a coffee shop selfie there. My family still thought I was barely getting by. Maybe a part of me liked it that way. But behind the scenes, my business was booming. I had 3 employees, clients in 5 states, and a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Every time I looked out at that view, I felt the fire in my chest settle into something steadier. Not revenge. Not even pride. Just proof. Proof that I had done it. Proof that I could stand on my own, bracelet still on my wrist, still listening to Grandma's words. And now, sitting at Dad's birthday table with my phone in my hand, I knew exactly what that proof was worth. The line was still open when I slipped my phone back under the tablecloth. My pulse had slowed. I wasn't leaving angry. Not this time. Are you serious? Nathan said from across the table, his fork clinking against his plate. You've been freeloading off Dad long enough. It's time you. I raised one eyebrow just slightly. Freeloading. My voice was calm, but it made everyone freeze. Mom looked between us, her lips pressed into a thin line. Dad cleared his throat, but said nothing. The sound of tires crunching on the driveway pulled everyone's attention to the window. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Nathan frowned. Who? I invited someone, I said simply, standing up. The silk of my blouse whispered against my skin as I walked to the door. When I opened it, Mariah, my assistant, stood there, perfectly polished as always, holding a slim leather portfolio. Behind her, my driver waited by the black SUV idling in the driveway. Ma'am, Mariah said with a small nod, handing me the folder. I turned back toward the table, holding it casually in one hand. Nathan, you said I should pack my bags. But here's the thing. I laid the folder down in front of Dad. Inside were the quarterly reports from my agency, complete with revenue figures that had commas in all the right places. This is mine, I said, my voice soft but steady. Every dollar I've earned since the day I left this house. I owe my company outright. We just signed a deal with a Fortune 500 client last month. The silence was absolute. Mom blinked rapidly, her hand going to her chest. Dad leaned forward, his eyes scanning the pages, then looking back at me with something that almost looked like pride. Nathan, though, was pale. You run a company? I built a company, I corrected. From a folding table in a 300-square-foot apartment. While you were busy calling me reckless. I took a slow step closer to him, not threatening, just present. I didn't call for permission then, and I'm not asking for approval now. But if you think you can still talk to me like the girl who left with one suitcase, think again. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if words had abandoned him. I let the moment hang before adding, if you'd like, I can have Mariah pull up the company website. Or the press release that went out last week. But I think you get the picture. Dad finally spoke. You built all this yourself? I nodded. Yes, Dad. Every bit of it. And I didn't tell you, because I wanted to know who I was without your voices in my head. The air in the room shifted. Not lighter, not yet, but different. I sat back down, smoothing my blouse, and folded my hands on the table. So, I said, looking at Nathan, still think I should pack my bags? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. For the first time in years, the power in the room was mine. No one spoke for a long moment. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock above the mantel. Then I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not smug, not vengeful, just calm. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I said quietly. But since Nathan has made it clear he still thinks I'm a burden, I think we should clear the air. Mom shifted in her seat. Honey. No, Mom. I said gently but firmly. This has been hanging over us for years. Tonight is as good a time as any. I looked at Nathan first. If you want me in your life, you're going to have to stop talking to me like I'm still the little sister who didn't measure up. You don't have to understand my choices, but you do have to respect them. That's the condition. He swallowed hard, his jaw tight, but he nodded once. Then I turned to Mom. You've always wanted to keep the peace, and I love you for that. But peace at the cost of my dignity isn't peace. If we're going to be close again, I need you to back me, even if it makes things uncomfortable. Her eyes glistened, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Finally, I faced Dad. He hadn't said much, but his silence had always carried weight. "You taught me to work hard, Dad." "I did. But I also need you to see me as the woman I am, not the daughter you were disappointed in. That's my condition for us moving forward." The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator again. I stood, my heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. "This isn't about money.
It's about respect."
If we can agree to that, we have a chance to start over. If not, I gestured toward the door where my driver still waited. "I can leave tonight, and we won't have to keep pretending." No one moved. Then Dad slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. "You've become someone remarkable," he said, his voice rough. "If respect is what you need, you have it." Mom nodded, tears on her cheeks. Nathan stared at me, then finally muttered, "Fine. Respect." It wasn't warm, not yet, but it was a start. I nodded once, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. For the first time, the terms of this family were mine to set. After dessert was cleared, the house slowly returned to life. Chairs scraped back, conversation started again, softer this time, more careful. I slipped out onto the porch for some air. The night was cool, the stars scattered across the dark sky like they'd been waiting for me. I turned the silver bracelet on my wrist, the one thing I'd carried from that night 3 years ago. Its surface had dulled a little with time, but the weight of it was grounding, steady. A moment later, the door creaked open. Dad stepped outside, hands in his pockets. "You remind me of her, you know," he said after a pause. "Your grandmother. She never let anyone tell her what she was worth either." I smiled faintly. "She's the reason I didn't give up." He nodded, then looked at me with something softer than I'd seen in years. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see you for who you are." The lump in my throat returned, but this time it didn't sting. "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly. "But I needed tonight to happen. For me." We stood there a moment longer before heading back inside. Nathan caught my eye from across the room. He didn't say anything, but his nod was the closest thing to an olive branch I'd ever gotten from him. Later, as I left, Mariah held the door for me. The black SUV purred softly in the driveway, waiting. I glanced back at the house one last time. It no longer felt like the place I'd run from. It felt like the place I'd chosen to walk back into on my own terms. Sliding into the leather seat, I rested my wrist against the window and whispered to myself, almost like a promise. No one tells me to pack my bags ever again. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, fiercely free.